Welcome into the video where you're going to learn the most universal opening trap for white that you can apply against various different opening choices of black. I'm Grandmaster Igor Smirnov, and let's get right into it. To set the stage for the trap, let me start off by saying that you're probably aware of the quickest or one of the quickest checkmates in chess, known as scholars checkmates. So it goes like this: white goes queen h5, bishop c4, and if black is careless, then queen takes f7 is checkmate. It's a nice thing, of course, to execute, but the problem is most of your opponents are familiar with it and they'll not get trapped like this. But not many players know that there is a more advanced way of executing a scholar's checkmate where you can get great results with, even against advanced level opponents. For example, if you start with pawn to e4, and after that we're going here into the Scotch Gambit. By the way, it's a very good opening. I've got a dedicated video about this. You may wish to check this out afterwards. And here, what if you go knight to g5? A very weird looking move, right? Why would you place the knight here instead of developing your other pieces? On the other hand, it makes some sense because maybe white is ready to play bishop c4 and hit this pawn on f7. Now, what is black going to do? Well, they're likely to get annoyed by this knight and decide to push it away by playing pawn to h6. But your knight says, hey, I'm not going to back down. I'm going to sacrifice my life for my other teammates. Now knight takes f7, king takes, bishop c4, guess what they play here, king to e8, queen goes out to h5, and you can notice the similarity between the scholar's checkmate and the current position. We'll still have the bishop as well as the queen teaming up against the black's king and aiming to deliver this checkmate on the f7 square. In this case, it is not a checkmate yet, but it's going to be within a couple moves after something like this. Boom. It may seem like a very primitive trap to you, but let me show you the database of games. Here in the right corner you can see the statistics of games and the number of games played in the second column. The most played move is pawn to e5, you respond with knight to f3, most common move knight to c6, you play pawn d4. The most majority of your opponents by far will take the pawn. Then what if you go knight g5? The top response, just look at this, is pawn to h6, and if you take it, king takes is forced, bishop c4, and the top response, again, by pretty large margin, is an immediately losing move, king to e8. So, simple trap, yes, but it really works. Now, let's say this time you want to stay solid and you don't want to play any weird moves and you just go into one of the most classical openings, bishop c4, knight to f6, the two knights game. Here after knight to g5, you're still attacking this pawn on f7. Black would need to block this, and after you take here, there is a very popular mistake, knight takes d5. It's a very well-known trap, but well, I shouldn't say very well-known because I've just checked again in the database, and knight takes d5, the losing move, is the second most played move here, and lots of players are playing this. And here it's known as the fried liver attack. You start off with knight takes f7, inviting the black king to go there, and after that you follow up with queen to f3, which delivers a double blow to the king as well as the knight here. And again, you can notice the similarity with the scholar's checkmate. You've got your queen and the bishop teaming up together against the black king and ideally wanting to checkmate it somewhere on f7 or in some other square. It doesn't really matter, right, if you can checkmate it. And because black needs to also support this knight, they would have to bring their king forward, which is obviously very dangerous and vulnerable. Then you just bring your knight forward here, knight to c3, and you start frying this king because it's pretty clear that it can't survive standing in the center of the board where almost the majority of the army is undeveloped. Now you're threatening to take this knight here on d5. Black would need to protect it, let's say knight b4, trying to maybe counterattack somehow, but you don't have to worry about this. You can simply castle. They would still have to protect this knight because you want to play a3, remove this knight, and after that take it. Therefore they would play pawn to c6, and now you're ready to blow it up with pawn to d4, opening up the position around the king so that you can start attacking it directly. And now the most played move is knight takes c2, which looks a bit desperate, but in fact it makes some sense. Black realizes that there is not much they can do about their king anyway, so they are at least trying to get a chance with some counterplay. But again, you don't have to worry, you're going after the king, so you just want to open up the position here and checkmate it. The plan is very simple. Now after knight takes a1, you can start trade here on d5, and now, because you can't take immediately, it's covered by the queen, you just bring one more piece into play. You get your rook involved, rook to d1, and now this is actually over. On the next move you will inevitably take it, perhaps with a bishop. The bishop cannot be taken because of the pain, and so usually they play queen a5 here, you take here, they go king e7, and voila, we've got this color's checkmate. Again, almost. they can play king d8, but after bishop g5, it's going to be checkmate on the next move anyway, right? Something like this. So, and again, another variation of this color's checkmate in a more advanced way, and it still works. You may be thinking, Igor, but what if they play anything else? Not pawn to e5, but any other move. Well, it can still be used. Let's go into something totally different. Alekhine's defense, knight to f6. And after pawn goes to e5, knight e5, d4, d6, knight f3, the classical line. Here black usually goes either bishop g4 or pawn to g6. Two main lines are here. And now you can once again jump with your knight to g5. And you can already guess the idea, right? Now, what is black going to do here? Well, the most frequent move is a losing move, bishop to g7. They're just overlooking that you can this time play queen to f3, and now you team up with the knight instead of the bishop, but the intent is still the same. Simply queen takes f7, which is almost a checkmate. In addition to that, you're also attacking here this knight on d5, and black is in big trouble. In fact, the black's position is already losing. They don't have to resign right here, but you got a decisive advantage here. Let's take a move back, and let's see what else they can do. If they realize that this knight on g5 is really dangerous, they might decide to push it away, but, well, you know what you're gonna do here, right? If you're my regular subscriber, then you know that, first of all, of course, you're afraid to say this. And after that, you still take knight takes f7. It's a fried liver attack, baby. King takes, queen f3 check, again, double attack to the king and the knight here on d5. It's all the same. If they want to save the knight, or else they will just be attacked without any material advantage, with a material disadvantage, I should say, if they just move their king away. So they would have to move the king forward, and now this king will easily be checkmated one way or the other. For example, if you continue with pawn to c4, attacking the knight goes back, you play pawn to d5, and taking here is not an option, because then just something like queen f4 is a checkmate. So they would have to go back instead, and after that, you continue with pawn to e6, king e8, queen f7, and it's again kind of colorless checkmate, right? With your queen on f7 checkmating the black king. Funnily enough, very effective trap. Let's go for another opening once again. This time it's gonna be the bishop's opening. By the way, very powerful opening weapon for white. I feel that my video about the bishop's opening is gonna get 1 million views within a couple months, so you'd better watch it right now and implement it in your games until everyone else knows it. Anyway, let's get back to it. Let's say black goes knight f6. I think it's the top response. And here we can offer an interesting gambit by playing knight to f3, offering this pawn on e4. And if they take it, hoping that they're going to continue with pawn to d5 on the next move and their position is great, you prevent this by playing knight to c3. Taking this knight here on e4, so they get a trade. Now pawn takes c3, and even though you sacrifice the pawn, you can see that a lot of your pieces are getting involved into the game, and it's definitely worth just one little pawn. Now what black is going to do here? They need to protect this pawn on e5 somehow, and if they play knight to c6, then it's not an option because knight g5, and now there is no defense to this pawn. It's gonna be gone, and black is in big trouble. Let's play a couple moves back. Here, instead of knight to c6, they may try pawn to d6. Looks like a better option, like trying to shut it down, keep everything locked. You still go knight to g5 though, with the same intent, taking either with a knight or with a bishop. If you take with a knight, you're also forking their queen and rook after that. So that's really annoying. And the only thing they can do to probably block it is to play bishop to e6. And then you take it here on e6 and you play queen f3. Surprise, surprise, this color's checkmate is coming. And even though black can prevent this from happening, there is another hidden threat here. Queen takes b7, not only winning this pawn, but potentially winning the rook in the corner as well. And again, if black has to cover the square f7, they would have to play something like this. Then you take the pawn, attacking the rook into the corner. The only way to save it is to play queen to c6, but then their king is left alone, and you can just chase it to death in a line like this. It's not a classical scholar's checkmate, but still, the checkmating piece is coincidentally on the f7 square, and now it is a checkmate. And to wrap this up, let me show you one classical game between Zukertort against Andersen, who were two of the strongest players at the time. Well, I started with pawn to e4, and black responded with a royal pass, very solid defense, and even more so, they played into this maybe it's called Stainy's defense or something like this, where they got the rock solid position in the center. They're just trying to defend everything. They neutralized the pain with their bishop. They supported this pawn on e5. Looks like their position is just rock solid. White castles, black goes knight to g6, preparing development bishop e7, and instead of playing some normal move, white played knight g5. This evil move that we saw many times today, which becomes an interesting adventure for the black's king. Alright, now this knight is a bit annoying. Maybe white wants to push f4 or attack this f7 pawn somehow. Black decided to drive it away, but we already know that knight is not going to go back. It's going to sacrifice on f7, king takes, and in this position it looks like a totally unsound sacrifice. And it actually is not perfectly sound if black plays proper moves, but it's hard to play proper moves. Because it looks like white has no attacking pieces whatsoever. Black is much better developed. He's got a whole lot of pieces around his king. How could white possibly checkmate it? Let's take a look. He played bishop c4, put in the bishop right. The king decided to go back. Well, it cannot go back along this diagonal because it's controlled by the bishop, right? Going forward does not seem an option. It's too dangerous. Going backward could be an option, but queen h5 may seem a little bit annoying, putting pin along this diagonal. And that's why instead of that, black decided to go for king to e7, which looks a bit awkward, but anyway, looks like it's surrounded by the black pieces at what could possibly happen. But anyway, it played queen to h5 here, still aiming for something like scholar's checkmate. If let's say this knight, which is currently attacked, decides to move away, then we've got scholar's checkmate, queen take f7. Black noticed that he was a strong player. That's why instead of that, he played queen to e8 to support the knight. And now let me ask you to think about this position and to write it down in the comments below. How would you finish this off as white? It's a pretty cool game, I gotta say though. Overall, I hope that you enjoyed this opening trap, which is very universal. We can see that it works against various different opening choices of black, and I could show you more, but just not to make this lesson endless, let's stop right now. And if you want to also bring your chess to the next level, you may wish to check out my free masterclass, The Best Way to Improve at Chess Instantly, by clicking the link on the screen.